All right, so I've done some thinking about this whole Coldcard fiasco, and I've got one here in my hands, and I wanted to record a quick video to share my thoughts, not necessarily about what happened. I don't want to relitigate that whole story, but what I do want to do is I want to give some color as to what that actually means for Bitcoin inheritance going forward. Okay, so the first and most obvious lesson is that you should never rely on a single hardware device to generate entropy upon which your entire inheritance plan rests. So in other words, if you've got a single sig and your plan is to pass on your Bitcoin through a single signature wallet, if the keys that you've generated are not sufficiently random, if it was a case like Coldcard where it was not random enough and that people were able to reverse engineer your seed phrase, if that's what your inheritance plan hinges on, there's a chance it could fail in the future. So what's a sensible strategy? Don't have your inheritance plan relying on a single device for entropy. You need to diversify. The second lesson, and this is perhaps less obvious, is a lot of people were traveling. A lot of people did not actually have access to their Coldcard. They either had a multisig setup on which there are several Coldcards, or they had a single signature setup where they had a Coldcard. Either way, they didn't have access to the device because, surprise, surprise, we don't carry these devices around with us all the time. So what did this episode show me? It showed me the importance of having accessible backups. We all know that devices fail. This device failed. This is a dysfunctional, unwell Coldcard. It's useless, as are all the ones that are actually working, incidentally. But be that as it may, you need to be able to access your backups in a rush. You need to be able to move your Bitcoin in a rush if the circumstances warranted it. I know of several people who were traveling at the time who were unable to access their Bitcoin, and as a result, they couldn't act timeously, and their Bitcoin was swiped. They didn't have access to the backups that would have enabled them to restore the seed phrase in a mobile wallet and then to move it into something safe. And so going forward, if you've optimized for $5 entry tax, which means you cannot move your Bitcoin if you want to in a hurry, that's not a bad idea. The trade-off, however, is that when you have to move it in a rush, you can't do so. And you may be a victim of situations like we've just experienced. And so that's kind of the third lesson that I would pull from this particular episode is when you're coming up with your Bitcoin inheritance plan and your Bitcoin self-custody setup, you cannot optimize for these two things simultaneously. You cannot optimize for reducing the prospect of a $5 entry tax and at the same time ensure that you have access to your Bitcoin when you're no longer there, when you're no longer traveling. The important part is that you have to be able to access your Bitcoin in a rush. And what this showed me for many people was they had secured their Bitcoin, but they were unable to access it when they needed to, which then got me thinking, well, what happens when you die? And so the bottom line here is that you need to have backups of your seed phrases, and those need to be accessible timeously, because time can be of the essence. Anyway, those are just some thoughts that I landed on that I wanted to share. Let me know what you think in the comments. And otherwise, if you want to know where your Bitcoin inheritance plan stands, go to mybitcoinbull.com, do a free Bitcoin inheritance stress test. It'll tell you exactly where the gaps are in your setup. Stay tuned for the next video.